When highly coupled social systems encounter severe political stress, the information environment becomes inundated with signal corruption. Every action is immediately met with competing and polarized interpretations. In this environment, classical correspondence epistemology fails. Attempting to exhaustively search for an objective truth among millions of conflicting data points rapidly exceeds any feasible computational budget. Continuing to demand a baseline objective reality in the middle of these disputes paralyzes institutions. The time required to model a perfect map of the situation far outpaces the time available to actually govern. The Bridge360 Metatheory Model provides an alternative mechanism for evaluating systems under stress. Instead of adjudicating the accuracy of claims, this model treats social systems as physical ones, measuring the energy and information required to maintain a specific institutional state. The new vocabulary is strictly operational. It replaces them with measurable metrics, like navigability, systemic coherence, and the management of entropy gradients. A system survives a high-noise environment by abandoning the search for absolute truth and optimizing for the mechanical management of entropy. This shift requires adopting Entropy Attractor Intelligence, or EAIP. This models a system's topological manifold. Intelligence is a continuous navigation process. The system optimizes survival by avoiding entropic blowout under strict constraints. Accurate representation is discarded. New metrics are trajectory stability and operating within bounded cognitive and operational budgets. Applying this to legal governance means evaluating the United States Department of Justice strictly as an entropy managing entity. To map this institutional behavior, we rely on Claude Shannon's formulation of entropy, applying it as a governing mathematical principle. Treating law enforcement as a thermodynamic boundary problem bypasses political rhetoric entirely. It allows us to calculate objective structural stability. This diagram illustrates the spine corridor. It represents the operational acceptability region for a governed system, defined by hard threshold parameters and a central equilibrium line. As long as the institution remains confined within this specific corridor, systemic coherence is guaranteed against external shocks. The mechanism that keeps an institution in this corridor is known as entropy-driven altruism. This builds directly on Peter Kropotkin's evolutionary theory of mutual aid, which observes that cooperative groups consistently outperform isolated individuals. It operates as a distinct complement to Charles Darwin's traditional model of individual fitness maximization and competition. A politically neutral system reduces the number of variables a citizen must track to survive. By making the law predictable, the state effectively lowers the information overhead, and thus the Shannon entropy, of the entire societal network. By minimizing these informational surprises, institutional neutrality functions as a thermodynamic configuration required to prevent a society from crossing critical fragility thresholds. Richard Dawkins defined memes as units of cultural transmission. To map institutional collapse, we have to move that concept from a cultural metaphor into a physical, measurable structure. Rule of inference memetics achieves this by treating inference patterns as physically instantiated replicators inside a network, much like tokenized data in a language model. Consider a logic loop propagating through an institution. A critic is defined as an enemy, who is presumed corrupt, justifying investigation. We map these tokens, solidifying into rigid pathways. This rule achieves massive memetic fitness, spreading rapidly, while containing zero evidentiary stability. When tokenized rules infect an institution, they behave as an invasive physical structure, generating enough force to push the system outside its spine corridor. The Bridge360 Metatheory uses a handshake protocol to connect these abstract structures to concrete legal data. The metatheory holds open the structural slots, and domain sciences supply the exact variables. For U.S. law enforcement, this operationalization is the Bridge360 DOJ Weaponization Assessment Protocol. This maps the DOJ institutional spine equation. P equals the sequence of T, C, E, R, O, I, J, and A. It tracks the prosecutorial pathway from initial targeting to final action. Here, E, evidentiary sufficiency, and N, political neutrality, are isolated as critical load-bearing invariants. A prosecution targeting a political figure remains navigable and structurally valid if and only if those specific invariants remain intact. The handshake protocol extracts the analysis from subjective political grievances, converting the dispute into objective, computable legal observables. Deviation from the spine corridor is defined mathematically as leakage. This illustrates operational leakage, or L0, isolated case defects like procedural errors or insufficient evidence, which remain bounded. Architectural leakage, or LA, is systemic failure, occurring when political commands penetrate the structure and loyalists replace career officials. Severe architectural leakage results in autocratic entropy export. This equation defines the export. The ruler's entropy change is less than 0, while the constitutional system's is greater than 0. The ruler achieves local stability by pushing uncertainty outward, flooding the surrounding network with fear, legal cost, and retaliatory risk. Adjudicating a politician's personal intent is entirely unnecessary. Institutional weaponization is proven simply by mapping this measurable thermodynamic transfer of energy and risk. To verify the integrity of the DOJ spine, the protocol requires an identity-blind perturbation protocol, a series of strict stress tests. Test 1 is the ally-opponent substitution. We swap a political critic out of the equation and insert a similarly situated presidential ally, checking if investigative intensity and charging decisions remain identical. Test 2 is the administration substitution. We assume the exact same facts occurred under a different governing party to see if the prosecutorial decision remains stable. Test 3 is counter-evidence insertion, introducing the strongest available exculpatory evidence to see if the legal theory holds. If the institutional trajectory collapses under these hypothetical swaps, the operational corridor is entirely identity-dependent. Failure during these perturbation tests provides mathematical proof that the institution has lost its foundational structural depth. This diagram maps the weighted scoring matrix. It tallies the variables of targeting, deviation, asymmetry, and auditability to compute a final numerical classification. A severe classification requires clearing 4 mandatory causal gates: provenance, deviation, comparator asymmetry, and weak convergence. High scores alone are insufficient without satisfying these structural gates. A band A+ classification indicates systemic weaponization. It confirms an administration-wide architecture where presidential target selection, political command, and loyalist intervention recur across multiple cases. By utilizing this scoring matrix, we bypass partisan debate to deliver an auditable, mathematical diagnosis of institutional collapse. The Bridge360 Metatheory provides a rigorous, disciplined framework to maintain systemic coherence, shielding institutions against the gravitational pull of autocratic attractors. Discarding the illusion of objective truth-seeking is the required first step to engineered institutional survival.